Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about security education. Monty and myself are on episode number 23, so pretty amazing. I mean, we've done 23 weeks, 23 episodes of a lot of cybersecurity, IT security information. So how are you doing this morning, Monty?
Pretty good. I forgot to plug my headset in. I kind of feel naked. I didn't know why. Sorry about that, you guys. A little bit of improvising going on here. Just take a second. But I find that the audio comes through a little bit better if I put up with that little nuance there. But yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of things going on. DNC hack. We don't know whether or not it's the Russians or whether or not it's some individuals in the United States masquerading as Russians in order to, create a little bit of confusion. We had a major hack in the Bitcoin community. There's a company by the, I think it's a technology called Ethereum. Mm-hmm. They had probably $60 million taken from one of their accounts, but it's sort of like frozen, and it's hard for the hackers to actually get access to it. But that is causing a little bit of anxiety in the cyber currency or the cryptocurrency space.
Right.
There's a number of things going on. Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, we've talked about Bitcoin, we've talked about the blockchain, we've talked a little bit about that, and it's interesting because that's supposed to be secure currency transfer, and it's supposed to be, besides the bank, something secondary, completely different. And we know, we talked about ransomware that, these hackers that have been, creating ransomware and attacking companies were using Bitcoin as their method of payment. Well, if now Bitcoin is getting hacked, maybe this is actually not a bad thing.
Well, actually, it's not Bitcoin itself.
Okay.
The people who created Ethereum, they actually took their own version of the coding. So you can copy the coding because it's open source, and you can make the equivalent of a cryptocurrency of your own and your own blockchain. But that implementation, unfortunately, if it's not done correctly, that needs to be checked. That needs to be vetted. And unfortunately, like we're finding in the in the banking industry and the technology spaces, sometimes more emphasis is placed on getting the product to market, getting the concept, getting the thing out there and in customers' hands, and then security takes a back seat. So with the Ethereum model, we're basically, you're creating smart contracts so that if I want to allow you to buy my car, after so many payments are made, this smart contract automatically executes and turns over the title to you. After so many payments are made to me, and it's automated and all that. That's the good news. The bad news is the hackers found a way to build their own smart contract that said, let's create a contract where I'm entitled to 1,000 times more money than I'm actually entitled to. That I'll get 1,000 times more money than I'm actually entitled to. So yeah, the system didn't go far enough as far as checking. So now the people who develop Ethereum are taking a second look in terms of, what they're going to do going forward, because smart contracts is a very, very revolutionary idea, but at the same time, it's a very new concept, very new companies, and
it can be compromised, as we can see.
Exactly. So I'm not a big fan of Ethereum, just so you guys will know out there. I'm a diehard Bitcoin and original blockchain fan, and it's a big difference between the original Bitcoin group and these offshoots. When we talk about cryptocurrencies, some of the things, they're a little bit different. Yeah, actually.
And let's actually just talk about that, which leads us into security,
right?
And our education. I mean, we talked about different facets of cybersecurity, IT security, financial security, health security, like everything, personal security. And one thing that I'll admit, when it comes to learning about security, it's so deep of knowledge. I understand high level of Bitcoin and the blockchain to have a conversation, but like you're hearing from Monty and you guys watching this, each of us have our own specialties in certain areas, right? And you can't know it all. And that's what brings
Right.
it back to like security education is, how do you educate yourself? How do you know what to educate yourself on? How do you know what's essential information, what's not essential? How do you know what's going to help you with your life, your personal life, your family, or even potentially your career, right? And you got to look at all these areas of security that we talk about affect all these areas of your life in some way or another. Like we're talking about like the Bitcoin and blockchain, all that. Well, they're starting to incorporate that in, say, e-commerce or business. You have to know what it is, what happens, what's the transfer, what's the security, is it secure? Does it connect to your bank? Does it not connect to your bank? How do you get money over to it? How do you get, like, all these questions you have to ask? And at the end of the day, is it secure? So, I mean, this is when we're talking about like security education is how do you educate yourself on these areas so that you are a power user. You don't want to be a naive user that you're just kind of using it for the sake of using it. You want to be a power user that you're using it because you understand it. So what do you think about this, Monty, about when it comes to security education?
Well, I think we really need to take a look at there's a whole lot of work to be done because right now it seems like we're being more reactive. We're not inviting as many. It doesn't cut across the gender-based lines. For instance, the number of women that actually have input and critical roles in the security space. Children need to be brought on board. And right now I'm reading a lot about how to get children at the earliest levels in K through 12, what we call K through 12 in the United States, how to start making sure that they're working with the building blocks, the coding, the basic concepts of coding and technology, at the earliest stages, so that when they grow up, they'll be more accustomed to how to start looking at some of the analytical concepts as far as security, cybersecurity, IT work, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole lot of work and education to be done, definitely.
Let's talk about this. Like, so you guys, depending on where you're watching this video, K means kindergarten, right? So you got kindergarten in grade 1. I mean, depending on your educational system, that's generally like junior kindergarten, grade 1, then grade 8 is your junior school, middle school, then you got your high school, then your secondary, which is, college or university, and you kind of move on from there. So what Monty's saying is completely right, is that we have to work at all different levels of kindergarten, just kind of making it fun and entertaining. Then as they grow through the process, making it more informative. Because, I mean, we've dealt with this, Monty, when we went to school, when they talked about, the police officers used to come in. Don't talk to strangers, stranger danger, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, now it's all online.
Yeah, and it's an interesting concept. Education, again, it cuts across so many different lines, in terms of where do you go out and seek information, online, and I'm finding that for myself, I'm a video-oriented, graphics-oriented person, and I need to see and I need to visualize these concepts. But at the same time, when I'm walking, doing my exercises, or maybe even in the gym, maybe I'll be able to listen to podcasts and absorb educational information that way. So there are so many different ways I think we need to concentrate on as an industry in terms of getting the word out. But the consequences are rather serious. And I was reading about some executives talking about right now in the cybersecurity space, they're probably going to start treating their cybersecurity team just like the chief financial officers and the other people in the boardroom, in the C-suite. You're going to be liable. We're going to be liable for making sure that information makes sense and that it's actually implemented correctly. You wouldn't have your chief financial officer, for instance, come into a meeting and give you sloppy numbers that talk about how your company is doing financially, just to find out that they weren't paying attention, they weren't doing their job correctly. They would get fired immediately. So I think we're going to be faced with a situation where more and more of the security teams will be held accountable, just like the others in the C-suite, because they are becoming part of the C-suite, and they need to be held accountable for when there's a breach.
And you're talking more of the corporate model, and I agree with that. I mean, we have to look at personal, we have to look at professional and corporate, and enterprise responsibility. Let's kind of talk about first in a personal,
sure,
arena, right, in that domain. People, just like you have to know about, accounting, a basic knowledge of accounting and financial information to understand how to balance your books, understand where your money goes, understand about your credit card and how you're paying things out, your bills. That's not taught in school like it should be. The same, like I'm going to say, is IT security. IT security, because of smart devices, your computer, how people are texting and emailing and connecting and going onto websites, it needs to be one of those essential programs that's incorporated, like you said, at junior kindergarten all the way up, that it's, a mandatory program that they're taking, that they're learning about. This is not something that is going away. It's not something we can kind of push to the side and they can deal with it later. This has to be a mandatory. You need math, you need history, you need geography, you need, financial, math and accounting. You need IT security. Like, it's just one of the facets in our lives that is now encompassing everything we do. It's not something that you can stay away from. You can disconnect. And it was interesting. I had this conversation about just, potentially getting a new car. Well, having a new car with the smart cars and how they're connected and their Wi-Fi and, they have GPS integrated. You can connect to your iPhone and dock your iPhone. So all this technology, all these benefits and features also leaves vulnerabilities. If I don't know what to ask and educate myself, I can leave myself vulnerable. And we talked about this several episodes about the Jeep getting compromised. Right. And it's on YouTube. If you guys want to go see it, look at Jeep being hacked. Right. And what you'll do is you'll find that there was two hackers that are on their couch videotaping, doing one video shot, while another video shot was of the guy in the Jeep. And they showed these guys hacking in, and they showed the reaction of the guy actually driving the Jeep and what was actually going on. And through that process, you kind of see, yes, I'm not trying to make, and let kind of pull back. I'm not trying to scare you and everyone like, oh my God, don't buy a new car. It's the point of being knowledgeable of what's there and how to secure it, asking the right questions, empowering you. It's like saying, and I'll give you an example of a knife. Well, a knife is such a great tool and can be used as a weapon. A knife is a great chef's tool, and you can do great art and great culinary and food. But it also can be dangerous because you can cut yourself or someone can use it as a weapon. It's the knowledge of how you use those tools. It's no different of the knowledge of how you use your computer, your smartphone, your smart devices. If you're empowered to use them properly, they're great tools. If you're not, you can be set up in vulnerabilities. And that's what it comes down to security education, is why I recommend that people do some sort of base, IT security, security, course, go into webinars, blab talks, podcasts, you name it. Anything you can do to constantly keep up, because as we know, Monty and myself, it's always changing. It's always, evolving to the point where, yeah, I know about, computer security. Well, guess what? Microsoft put out a patch and then opened up this vulnerability. Windows 11 came out now, not 10, but now 11. And now you download because you think it's all these great things, but there's vulnerabilities. If you're not educated, you can get trapped.
Well, it's a daunting task. I was listening to a podcast with a bunch of experts talking about patching, for instance, in the mobile environment. Right. With Android having tens of millions of devices out there, and iOS having millions of devices out there, and we have a lot of consumers as usual. It's not a big surprise that a lot of us, we are reluctant to instantly apply the patches, and the consumers are doing, I think, a better job as compared to businesses, mainly because a lot of times in the business arena, you want to get approval. You got applications that are running, you got a formal process when it comes to, do I install something, do I change something? And if I do, how is it gonna affect our other, applications that are running, and all that. So these things have to be vetted. Sometimes it could take weeks or months. And what could happen is, the hackers, they look at these open windows, particularly in the business arena, and they say, okay, we have a certain amount of time. We'll make exploit kits that go ahead and take advantage of the idea that you guys can't patch up these things quick enough on your business devices, and they go ahead and take advantage of that. So there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of people just need to be educated to the idea that when we're making, again, this probably is going to go back all the way back to the manufacturing process. What does it mean to put out a device that's been checked for safety, that's been checked for security. Because if you open your typical instructions on a lamp or some lighting fixture, you'll probably get more instructions and more information as to how to use the light or something, as compared to some of the other things that we typically use for communications in our businesses, and some of the technology that is actually more critical, than a fixture in a home.
Well, let's first talk about, you brought up a lot of great points, Monty. Let's first kind of drop back down to the business area of change, right, and patching. A lot of people don't know, and this is why I wanted to kind of bring this back and discuss this, because sometimes we're employees and we're like, well, why don't they make this change? Why isn't it faster? Why does this happen quicker? We can do it at home. Right? Why aren't they changing and updating the operating system, running out this patch, doing that faster? And what Monty said was a great point, is that they have to go through change management. And change management, because they might have archaic systems, they might have proprietary applications, right, that they don't know if that patch is going to affect that application. They have to go through a testing phase. So they have an environment that's isolated that they go through a testing, because they don't want to take the whole network down, or they don't want to take an application down. So they go through this testing process. In this testing process, they put it up, they run all the applications, that they have a list of applications, and they run all the tests to make sure there's no errors or the application doesn't fail. And as their testers are going through, they're checking off in the web apps and their local desktop apps and all that. And once it passes that testing criteria, then they look at rolling out to a small, focus group, so that the power users start to play with it and say, okay, yeah, you know what, it works. And then they roll it out company-wide. Because if they don't do this testing, they have to have a backup plan. Because if it does take out the network, or it slows it down the process, or affects an application that's mission critical, or something that is company sensitive, whatever that may be, they have to make sure they have a rollout plan that it doesn't affect the application so much that it takes the application completely down and they can't recover from it. Right.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about how do you implement these changes and get them done in an expedient way. We were talking about mainframe computers on the last session, for instance. And if your mainframe computers, as they typically are, they're the workhorse. They're the backbone of your corporation. Whether you run airlines and they're managing the planes that are flying above us, or whether it's the travel agencies of the world, or whether it's the banking systems of the world, that's a very critical piece of machinery. And a lot of the people who manage them are separate from the people who are administering for that department. In other words, you got a certain person who approves when there's pen testing for the mainframes, and you get another group of people who are actually hands-on. And those are two different groups. So when we step into that environment and we say, look, we need to take out this mainframe computer and make absolutely sure, whether or not it's locked down and whether or not it's subject to malware, et cetera. A lot of times the person that you're talking to that's actually running that machine is not the person that's going to give you approval. So we need to make sure we get into those industries and target, above all, the industries that are more likely to want to listen and want to participate. So the good news is the banking industry is finally starting to come around, and the travel industries they know that they're at the top of the list, because again, if you get 5,000 flights that have been canceled all of a sudden because there's a glitch in the system and you're trying to install a patch or something, that's a major problem. So yes, some industries are more likely than others to understand the urgency and the need to get those workhorses of corporate America, get them running and get them running securely.
Exactly. That's what we're saying. Like, there's this happy balance, that you have to make sure the systems are working. You're testing things out properly. But you also and that's what we talked about, the CIA of security, confidentiality, data integrity, and availability. Well, if you're not kind of project planning those three areas, that you're keeping your systems confidential, keeping the integrity up, and your systems are running, and then you keep the availability that people can access it, your staff, your clients, whatever that may be. If you're not thinking all those domains, what happens if one falls through, now you have a security problem. Now you have a vulnerability issue. You have a compromise. So now you have to go back. And that's why when you look at patch management, you got to make sure that this is always in your mind. Like, okay, we're going to run this patch. We're going to test it out. We're going to do this update. But, what are we going to do if we have, an issue, a problem? How are we going to, pull that that patch back? Is it going to affect anything we pull back? Is it going to affect the registry or the code in another application?
Yeah, right.
Did it write over that? And now how are we going to recover from that? So these are all things that you have to think about on a company kind of infrastructure that a lot of people don't think, because they think of, oh, I have my phone, I have my device. Well, why don't you just update it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's easier in the consumer space a lot of times to actually get that done as compared to the corporate environment. But also, I want to ask you a question, Brandon. What do you think about this concept? There's an article and I mentioned it on the side there, where we're talking about China and how they're doing sort of public relations when it comes to spying in that particular country. And the reason why I think it's relevant is because what they're doing is they're trying to make a cultural change whereby average everyday citizens are seeing public service announcements on the buses and the trains and the billboards out throughout the city, for instance, subways, and they're told what to look for, just like we have our terrorist warnings, where you have the yellows and the reds and the different colors that indicate the severity of the terrorist situation, the threat at that time. And I'm thinking that why don't we take a look at that type of public relations campaign, but extend that into the cyber realm, so that we're actually talking about public relations again, getting that information out into the public domain, and trying to make sure that people understand that the cybersecurity threat is just as real and very detrimental, just like the terrorist related threats.
So I think the problem that we're going to run into is China has already been trained habitually that this is how they get information. This is how they work on delegating information, what they can see, what they can't see, what they access, what they are not allowed. When we get in North America, we have freedoms, right? We have all these freedoms to be able to do it. We have the freedom not to listen. We have the freedom to click close. We have the freedom to ignore, right? We have all that. So when you get into countries like you said, like China, where they're showing ads and information and broadcasts and all that, we're not used to that. In the sense of, think of it this way. Even myself, if I got a news broadcast, and one of the TV providers was doing this recently, and they were doing Amber Alerts. And if you guys are not familiar with Amber Alerts, is when a child has gone missing or been, they think has been kidnapped or anything like that. They send out an Amber Alert, and the Amber Alert says like the identity of the child and potential information that might be pertinent to finding the child. So if they were last seen in a car, what's the car's identification? What's the license plate number? What's the serial number? They might have a lot of information. Now, don't get me wrong, they won't have the serial number, but they have like the make, model, and the license plate. But they have all this, and they have an Amber Alert. Well, this came across my TV. The first thought I had was to change the channel.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. We're trained in North America is, I don't need to listen to this. I can change the channel. I can move on. Well, it was on all the stations at that time, but that was my first thought. I think that's the training in North America is our first instinct is to ignore.
Well, yeah, you have an option, definitely. But I'm wondering whether or not, these freedoms, which are very integral to our society and our culture, these freedoms are doing us a disservice in terms of whether or not we actually are going to be held accountable or not. Because right now, I'll give you an example, perfect example. In the banking community and the retail industry, there's a big fight going on. Walmart is actually suing MasterCard, Visa, and American Express, the merchant, the credit card issuers of the world, because Walmart is taking a look at the chip and pin technology, right? Okay. Now, this is a very old technology, but it's a very effective technology. If you go to Europe, for what I understand, and you use a chip and a pin combination when you're doing your transactions, that's almost like two-factor authentication in a respect. But in the United States, we were supposed to implement that type of protocol, but we actually settled for a stupid magnetic stripe reader where you just put your card into this reader, and it takes a little bit longer. So you're processing fewer transactions in the same amount of time as before. But at the same time, you sit there and wait, and you get an approval, but there's no secondary or backup authentication, right?
Right.
You know, I'm not putting a pin. I'm not using a fingerprint. I'm not using anything else. You're just reading this magnetic stripe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, believe it or not, Walmart is saying, you know what, you guys, let me do retail, and you guys just issue the cards and make sure the money gets transferred throughout the network.
Right.
And so MasterCard is saying, Walmart is saying, look, we want to give our customers the option of putting a PIN code in there as part of that transaction process. And that way, if there's a hacker or anyone else that's trying to compromise our system, they're going to have a more difficult time because
right.
you need the card, you need the PIN, and all of that, right?
There's layers.
And yeah, you got to have as many layers as possible. We're not going to get into the online realm because that's millions and millions of dollars of fraud in that space because card not present is a major issue, let alone card present situations. But anyway, to make a long story short, that's a very old technology that's very, very well implemented outside the United States, but in the United States, it's very watered down. And right now, the retail banking industry is fighting the banking industry because when there's a hack or a compromise, the bank said, well, it's your fault. And the retail people said, no, it's your fault. You got this old technology. And nobody is admitting or nobody's taking responsibility.
Right. Yeah, they're just passing the buck. Now, I know with the new technology that we have, and I'm sure you see is that swipe technology now, where you can tap the actual debit machine, the Moneris or whatever that may be. You can tap it and then it pays.
Like an Apple Pay.
Kind of like an Apple Pay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now they have that chip where you can tap it. And it's starting to go that way. But the problem is this when they tap it, right, you still have this problem that can be read. And we've seen this and we've talked about this where now you can buy readers where you're in an airport and I tap your wallet, I can read that credit card information or that debit card because now I just tapped it and I had the reader to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we need that second layer, like you're talking about, is that second layer that, if you tap it, you're not able to read at that point. You need the PIN to be able to decrypt it or read that information.
Right. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why it is that in the United States that when we had the opportunity to add that second layer, we decided, let's save some money. And so I think what they're not telling us or what no one's acknowledging, we're saving a little bit of money by not implementing that secondary way of authenticating. But at the same time, it really doesn't do us any service because the target hack and all the other hacks are showing us that you really have to have a good robust system where you're not watering down a good technology that's actually going to work for you.
So I don't think it's money. I actually think it's convenience.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. Convenience is what I had in mind, but it kind of like slipped there. When it's convenient, you guys, to have shoppers go in a store, a retail environment, and quickly swipe and all that makes it look like everything's working fine and customers are happy and store owners are happy because people are going through that quickly. But sometimes quickly in and of itself, it doesn't mean you have good security. So we have to really understand that it's one thing to say I can get my customers in and out of the store within 5 seconds. And there's another thing to say there's a very little likelihood that this is going to come back to haunt me in the way of chargebacks or it's going to come back to haunt you as a customer in terms of additional charges on your card and identity theft and all of that.
Exactly. And I think that's where we look at company and marketing. And when they do study groups and all that, people are going, oh, it's taking so long in line. I wish it was faster. And the companies, these banking companies, the credit card companies are going, oh, well, we'll make it more convenient versus doing a stronger marketing campaign on the other side and saying, you know what, we're not actually going to make it faster. We're going to make it more secure because this is the amount of confidence that happen. This is what happens on credit cards and online shopping. So we're going to help you even be more secure. We might add the chip so you can do it, but you also have to add a password because we're not a layer of security. That's how the marketing campaign should be. But as we know, it's, little Jimmy or, and his mom goes in the store and, he's running around. She needs to get going. She has a coffee in her hand. She has her bags. And how does she scan fast? She taps the card and she walks away. Oh, it's so easy. It's so convenient. And we see these commercials that make people go, oh my God, yeah, I have a busy life. I'm overthinking things. I'm overwhelmed. I need something more faster. I need faster, faster, faster. But then they don't think about, yeah, that faster technology, that faster process leaves them more vulnerable.
No, look, we have to, I think we need to put pressure on the MasterCards and the Visas and American Express entities as a whole, because they are really the backbone, particularly, when it comes to how do we get transactions processed for the most part. And that infrastructure, that backbone is something that a lot of us, we don't have the option of not using. So we have to work with those companies, unfortunately. But I think what we also need to hold them accountable, because if we have an inferior technology in that space, and this goes to the idea of education, you need to understand, look, your credit card information, your identity, et cetera, is not being safely transmitted over the network. It's not safely being stored, because at that point of sale terminal, the software, the operating system inside of it, if that's compromised, guess what? There is no security. That's how we had all those hacks that we had in the past, where some vendors' credentials were stolen, and that was the point of entry. So yeah, we need to become more educated. Go ahead.
And the thing, as you know, is that we're becoming such a convenient society because we're not, and this is where let's kind of go back and take a step back about us as human beings. Right. We are trying to make things faster, more convenient, more connected, and we're doing all that, but we're missing the human element here. We're missing that we need to take time. We need to slow down. We need to smell the roses. I mean, this is a cliche to say, right? And we're trying to do things so fast and use technology for so much, but don't realize that the technology is not a bad thing when you use properly. When you use quick and convenient and fast and not understand how you're using it, then what happens, that leaves compromise. And then when people go is, oh my God, I can't believe my phone got compromised or my credit card. How would that ever happen? Well, it's because you were going so fast, you didn't read what actually could happen. You didn't understand that the convenience actually made you more vulnerable, right? The availability, right, being so available made you compromised, because what happens is, you were tapping your card all over and you didn't realize that reader that guy had was actually, not the right reader, and he took your credit card information and sold it online in the dark web.
Right.
Whose fault is that? Is that theirs, or is that yours, or both?
Right. I think the key term or key word here, cyber literacy word for today, will probably be partnership. We need to have a partnership whereby the banking industry, for instance, and the retail industry, or any other industry that's working together, for instance, with the banking industry, everybody needs to work together, because see, I can offload the liability or responsibility onto the banking side if I want to. I can say, look, you guys aren't doing a good enough job, so if something happens, it's your fault, right? And they can say, oh yeah, you know what, we don't manufacture point of sale terminals. We don't have anything to do with what type of customers are coming in your store, in and out of your store, or something like that. But I think when it comes down to it, both of these entities need to take a look at what does it look like to have a weak system. Okay, how do you go from having a weak system, which is basically the point here, to go into a system whereby, we lessen the likelihood of having these problems. And I think that's one of those situations where, you really want a design element such that, like when Apple came along with the smartphone, the concept of using a mobile device and all that wasn't extraordinarily new. But that company came out with some design implementations that took it to whole new levels, right? Whereby now, all of these complex things that go into the phone, and the phone itself was made such that, you don't have to have very much brains in order to use this very sophisticated device. So we may need an Apple moment in the financial sector where someone says, look, this is what it looks like to go into a store. And I saw one model not too long ago where somebody literally took the Apple store model and said, look, when you come into my department store, for instance, we're going to have people. We're not going to have cash registers and lines all over the place. We're going to have people, sales clerks, for instance, with these devices. They're going to walk up to you as you're browsing around, and we're going to interact directly with you. And we don't have to worry about you queuing in a line. You don't have to worry about, taking a grocery cart through this particular section and checking out here and checking out there. You're gonna be doing what you normally do, looking at your product, trying out your shoes, putting out your shirt, and I'll come up to you when you're ready, and we'll look at your transaction individually. We'll process you, and you go about your business. So, we're probably gonna have to rethink what it means to have that format in the United States, particularly where you queue up, go through a line, have a single point of processing transactions, and then you go out the door. So there's a few things that need to be changed probably in the United States particularly.
For sure. And I think what happens is companies and, like you said, banking and the financial industry need to work together. And then they need to have a third component of security. They need to have an outside security vendor, an outside security company acting on that board to discuss the challenges, because they have their internal security people, but they're working with the company's best interest. So if it's Walmart, if it's the bank, they're working with the bank's best interest. They need to have a third party that works with the whole best interest of the whole process, right? Because then what happens is they can kind of see, well, that process has 5 good points, that process has 5 good points, but each of you are still missing 3 on each side that we need to get combined to make this secure, right? Not just make it available, but also make it secure in this process, right? And this would be I won't say a perfect, a better solution, right? Than what it's happening right now. And I think that's where you're saying is like, the literacy word, is kind of, and for me, it's more of accountability.
Okay.
Right? Because we need to take accountability, 1, as users of the education, 2, businesses like we're talking about, of how they implement their processes and their systems and making sure it's secure. The financial industry needs to take accountability, right? And they need to say, like, what? We were taking extra steps to make sure you're secure, and market that and make sure they educate their clients, businesses and users, right? They have to make sure that education is going out. So it's very important. And I think that kind of leads me into, education. Let's kind of get back into it. How do we get educated, Monty? Like, what are some things that you would recommend people do to be educated, first and foremost, as just general users? Then we'll talk about companies. So as a general user, I'm John Doe, I work at a corporation, a company, maybe I do accounting, whatever that means. How do I go out and be educated about IT security?
Well, I think it's going to be a top-down approach. Like most things in the corporate America, for instance, how I feel about my job, how enthusiastic I am, how knowledgeable I am, really has to do with what comes down from the top in terms of, is my company putting a lot of emphasis on me just getting calls out if I work in a call center? Or is the company just telling me to get as many widgets out or electronic devices out the door, onto the dock, onto the tractor trailer? Is that the major emphasis? Or is someone at the top saying, look, we want this device or these products or these widgets to actually be tested thoroughly, and we want some way of documenting who made what, who inspected it, and whether it passed all these tests, and maybe then it goes out the door, right? Or maybe our obligation is to work with, for instance, depending upon how sophisticated the device is, maybe the Department of Homeland Security or the government agencies of the world can give us some sort of standards, some guidelines, some minimum benchmarks. See, I think one of the problems is we don't have minimum security related benchmarks that say this product has to meet these benchmarks, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't get shipped out. It doesn't get put on a shelf anywhere. So I think what we probably need to do is make sure that every once in a while, the business people in the C-suite, they hold meetings, they hold conferences where everybody finds out what their role is, why it's important, and make that part of the mission statement. Right now, I don't really think it's part of the mission statement. I think it's an afterthought. And
well, let me pull you back, because I understand you kind of went to the corporate model, but I'm talking about John Doe.
Oh, okay.
John Doe, plumber. Let's kind of even take it more simple. I'm a plumber. I'm a mechanic. How do I educate myself about IT security? If you're a company, I agree. There's there should be a certain policies and procedures and education that, but it only trains me on the company's security, the company's system. It doesn't train me on the Internet of Things of my fridge and my stove and my car and my iPhone and my home PC and my kid's iPad. That doesn't train me on that. It just trains me on the company's policies and procedures and security best practices and guidelines. Right? And I agree with you. I mean, companies need to take responsibility, but I'm talking about, let's kind of look at the basic level here. How does John Doe that works at a mechanic shop, how does he go out and become security literate and have a base knowledge?
Well, let's take a look at this. Again, going back to K through 12 in the United States, we have an obligation to make sure that when you go through our school system, you're going to learn science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? But right now, we need to add another one. We need to add something to do with technology or coding or something, because the world is changing, right? And if you come out of there unprepared and you don't know too much about, I'm sorry, the technology is in there, but within technology, we need to take a look at how prepared you are, how knowledgeable you are about the things that we're trying to do as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And that includes, of course, how to determine whether or not a phishing email is on your computer or something like that. But I think, we can start early, we can start soon, and we can make sure children, because when you get children educated at the most primary levels, basic levels, then they grow up, I think, with an understanding, a little bit more of an understanding in terms of how this device should work, how this operating system should work. Is it secure? Is it not secure? And instead of being as intimidated as adults, because we talked about earlier, if your phone is working, your laptop is working, you're going to consider that you're okay, right? But someone else who's grown up in an environment that says, look, wait a minute, you don't have the firewall on, it's not working properly. You don't have the latest operating system. That's a problem. You're using outdated applications, or that could be a problem. So I think, once we educate children at the basic levels in terms of the things that we're talking about right now, maybe they'll be the ones that say, look, no, this operating system needs to be up to date, and these things are obvious to me. So let's make sure we get them taken care of and keep them taken care of.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. When in the system as a whole, started junior kindergarten, work our way up, but we still have John Doe out there. John Doe now, does he have to go back to junior kindergarten? Is that what you're saying? So that's what I'm saying right now, and I agree with you. I mean, you're looking at long-term plan, long-term strategy, for sure. Right. We have to get, start at the beginning, work our way up, but it still leaves that plumber, John Doe, out there kind of to hang on and go, well, what about me? And I think what I was trying to get at, and some people are watching this, is because when I do information sessions and I go out and do talks and presentations, the one question I get through the presentation is, well, how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to learn? Where am I supposed to go? And that's what I was trying to see what kind of feedback you had, Monty. And the one thing I'd say is you got to look at your community information courses, things that are around, meetups. You can go online. There's lots of great information that are podcasts. I was pulling up here, like if you want to dive a little bit deeper and actually take courses, CBT Nuggets is one, Udemy, stackskills.com, lynda.com, very cost-effective courses that you can go take about, IT security, that you kind of get a base knowledge, right? And then what happens is you can kind of see where you need to learn from there. And then starting conversations, being part in the communities where you can kind of say, hey, I have a question. I want to know more about this. I think that's where we have to first start, because when you have that base and then you go into your company, you're able to ask intelligent questions. If you don't have that base and they give you all this, here's your security policies, you kind of go, okay, and you sign off and go, I really didn't know what that meant, but I know I'm not allowed to go and surf, adult sites when I'm at work, and I'm not supposed to be downloading this. I'm not supposed to be going on Facebook. You kind of have the base policies, but you don't know in depth. If you have more of a deeper knowledge on your foundation, then you're able to understand the policies better, and you're able to ask better questions. And then that happens when it comes to the purchasing, your purchasing process, is that now, since you have both those, now when you go into the industry and start purchasing things, you start to go, hold on, does that have encryption? Well, how do you know about encryption? Well, I took a course last week that talked about encryption. My company works with encryption constantly. So now you have double the information. That now when you're asking about having a device with email and all that, is there encryption on that email client or whatever? Now you're asking the questions and know why you're asking it.
Well, see, that's really what I was getting at earlier when I talked about public service announcements. Because when you think about it, when you have some rock star or celebrity like Kardashian, and they're talking about some of these topics that are not as consequential as cybersecurity, right? They're talking about the Big Macs and the Carl's Jr. burgers or something. That gets a lot of attention. That generates actually a lot of sales for everything that they touch, everything that they mention, right? But what if you had the equivalent of a Kardashian or someone who talked about cybersecurity, awareness threats, et cetera, et cetera? Well, it may seem like it's it's a totally opposite of what you would typically expect from those types of people. But believe it or not, in the United States, a lot of the younger people, they put a lot of emphasis, and the public in general puts a lot of emphasis on those quote unquote successful people.
But I think it depends on what they say. So they're talking about cancer, water, the lack of water in certain areas. They're talking about feeding the hungry. They're talking about some sort of disease. There's a cause or a right behind it. I think, yeah. But if you see with our young generation, if I said, endorse this company or do all this, they pull back a bit.
Well, I'll give you an example. I think it was probably Paris Hilton or one of those female stars, very young person. I can't think it was. She had her phone hacked, right?
Right.
Her pictures that were stored in the cloud were that account was compromised, and a lot of those pictures were put into the public domain, right?
Yeah, and many stars kind of had that Apple hack, yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't the first time, and it shouldn't have been as big a deal, but it was made a big deal because this particular celebrity, right, happened to her, and when that happened, guess what happened? Apple came out, and everybody made a big deal out of, are my pictures safe in the cloud? Do I have appropriate passwords and such? Because it's supposedly this person had a very weak password and it had nothing to do with Apple's own security. It had to do with that person's particular password in terms of it not being complex enough. Right. Later on, we found out that brute force attempts on Apple's cloud infrastructure could have been a little bit more robust, because actually your PIN code is like 4 numbers. And people are wondering why Apple doesn't give you more. So you have, so you can't use brute force attacks against the cloud. But yeah, that situation was highlighted, and the public really jumped on it, embraced it, because this particular very attractive, very young superstar person had their nude pictures put out into the public domain.
Here we're going to go on this point. You're saying, and I saw that campaign, but how many young people actually took that to heart?
Well, I'll tell you this. It was the beginning. I can't say that in and of itself was a total way of addressing, from that point on and to the definite future, how we're going to look at that and thinking that it was solved completely. But what I'm saying is, and I understand what you're saying. Like, and this is what I'm trying to show the contrast. If I got a celebrity, Bono, Paris Hilton, one of the Kardashians, to talk about the water deficiency over in the Middle East, right? People would jump on, oh my God, it's so sad. What are we going to do? And they would jump on that because there's an emotional connection. There's an actual kind of cause behind it. Oh, sure.
When celebrities get their naked pictures hacked, yes, there's an information out there. There's a marketing, but the younger people, and this is where I'm going at, the younger people kind of go, it's not going to happen to me, and they keep doing it.
Right.
So I understand what you're talking about, and that's what I'm saying with the public announcement. It's a little bit harder right now because in North America, we kind of go, when it comes to security, don't worry about it.
Oh, sure.
Right? Paris Hilton's talking about, oh my God, my phone got hacked and it got compromised. Make sure you have security. Don't post naked pictures and do all the things, or sexting and all that stuff. And then what happens? You hear this marketing pitch that goes up, but all of a sudden it drops just as quick, and the kids keep doing the same thing.
Well, we can't take it for granted because I'll give you a little tactic that you can relate to yourself as an expert in the field. When the government decided what case they were going to use to give us the impression that they need to have a backdoor into phones, what did they do? They picked a terrorist-related situation,
Right.
even though they had a couple of dozen cases that had to do with drugs being sold and burglaries or something, other things that were centered around getting access to a phone and getting information off of the phone. What did they do? They picked a case where the public would embrace it, latch onto it, because it was associated with terrorism, right?
Well, it's associated with death.
With death, exactly.
Right.
So sometimes how you frame the narrative makes more of a difference as compared to the actual problem. In
Right.
other words, once they got that precedent to use this terrorist-related death-centric narrative going, we started to take a look at, oh my God, everybody and their brother-in-law was blogging and writing and discussing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes how we frame that narrative makes all the difference in the world, and that message somehow gets conveyed out there. And it was kind of interesting in terms of, which case was chosen out of all of the cases involving phones, why we should get access to phones. That one resonated with the general public.
And like I said, I'm not disagreeing with the emotional attachment, like I said, water, terrorism, ISIS, right. You name all that. I think when it comes down to basic security,
yeah,
their phones, the images and all that, that takes a lesser, it decreases the value and the scarcity, because you're not going to die from sending a picture. You're not going to be killed. Yeah. ISIS is not going to come and attack you because you send a new picture of yourself.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what happens is kids, teenagers, people that are doing it, young adults, kind of look at it and kind of go, yeah, it's not that bad. Oh, if I get a hack, but I'm secure enough,
Exactly.
But when
right.
you talk about terrorists, then also now people freak out. But you're not going to say terrorists are looking at your naked pictures.
Yeah.
Right? Well, people are going to go, that's illogical. Why are they looking at my naked pictures?
Yeah. Well, but my point is sometimes how you frame it makes all the difference in the world. It just so happened that narrative really was effective for the government, right?
And I'm not saying that, I'm not disagreeing the framing
yeah.
and the story around it. All
right.
I'm saying is I think at this day and age of security,
yeah,
when it comes to physical security or harm of death or looking at helping people survive and live, for sure, you use the narratives in those areas, you get a bigger bang, bigger impact, bigger exposure.
Well, what about this? If I tell you I'm going to track your cell phone and I'm going to find out where you live and kidnap you, you think that may resonate with you?
It doesn't. That's the thing. One of the guys we had on the show not too long ago,
right,
does specialize in helping children and families with cyber crimes. I was in Ottawa. Here's an example. I was in Ottawa 2-3 months ago, and it was cyber tips, right? And all it is they focus for Canada for children.
Right.
The scary thing, they give very direct, focused scare tactics on their marketing. And they're finding 40,000 increases per month of cyber crimes. Even though their marketing material is, you will get kidnapped, you will have a predator, you will get raped, and even that, there's still 40,000 increases in cyber crimes per month in Canada. So I said, when we look at that, the kids look at it, the younger adults kind of go and they push that era aside.
Yeah.
And it's going to take reframing and re-educating. That's what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying in the sense of when it comes to broadcasts and doing all that. I just think at this time we have to go through a re-education, which is going to take some time, of how important it is, because in North America, I find that we ignore it.
Well, it's not going to be a silver bullet. Trust me. We're one size fits all. Definitely. I think typically you want to have a multi-pronged approach. If we take a look at public service announcements, if we take a look at meetup groups, if we take a look at social media campaigns, I was reading about, for instance, the government is trying to counter ISIS's online social media related propaganda campaigns, right?
Right.
So the people in Washington did something very unique. They said, look, let's bring people from Madison Avenue, the big advertisers and such. Let's go to Silicon Valley and get the people in the technology space, and let's go to Hollywood and let's get people in entertainment space, and let's put all these things together, and let's come out with social media campaigns or media campaigns in general that's going to give us the opportunity to make a very, very compelling counter message.
Right.
Because believe it or not, ISIS and a lot of those terrorist organizations, okay, whatever, they're doing exactly this on the social media front, and they're recruiting a lot of people, and they're telling these younger people, you know, we're offering you something. We're offering you something that Western society can't offer you, right? And then and the people in the government and United States government are wondering, you know, okay, wait a minute, these people are very orchestrated, very well organized. We need to do something. So and they're finding out that, okay, we need to be just as formidable as far as getting all of these different entities together and making a counter message. So yeah, I'm thinking that it's going to be multi-pronged, and it's going to be very, very orchestrated, and it's going to cover various ways that we interact with media and information, and it's going to be multifaceted, I think.
No, and I agree. So this has been a great discussion. We're coming up. It's actually 11 o'clock right now, so we did the full hour. It's been awesome, Monty.
Thank you.
So what do you want to cover next week?
Let's see here. I don't know. What do you think we haven't covered yet?
Well, do you want to go into the blockchain? I know we haven't really talked. We talked, you know, bits and pieces, but you really want to go into the blockchain, what it is, you know, what people need to know about it?
Oh, sure. Let's take a look at Bitcoin. Let's take a look at the blockchain, and let's see if there's any way that these particular critical state-of-the-art technologies, if you will, whether or not they have any relevance in the security space. Because I think a lot of people are going to find out that there's something there that needs to be looked at, definitely.
Awesome. Well, let's do that for next week. I think there's been a great episode, a lot of information we covered. We kind of covered a variety of information and topics here. Again, when it comes to education, just get out there, start learning, learn as much as you can, ask lots of questions. You got to learn about cybersecurity, IT security, whatever term you use it, you got to learn about it.
Right. And as usual, the show notes are rather comprehensive. And, you know, you guys, when you get a chance, go to the show notes and take a look click on the links, talk to Brandon about implementing educational seminars, meetups, et cetera, so that you can figure out, because see, a lot of this doesn't do you any good unless you implement it and execute it, okay? And I'm finding, maintain it. And I'm finding that in the cyberspace, there's a confluence, or if that's the correct word, a converging of physical and cyber to the point where you can't take for granted, you know, what it means to secure your physical as well as your cyber. And that means your house, that means your car, that means your blender, your refrigerator.
All of the above.
All of the above. So yeah, try to make sure that you work with both of us, and that you actually start learning and educating yourself about these things.
Yeah, and it's one of those things like Monty's saying, you just got to keep going. You got to ask lots of questions and get out there. So Monty, thank you so much. We'll post this up. Right now we're working on last episodes and this episode. We'll get it posted up. Make sure you tell your friends, family members, you know, everyone else, come out Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be talking next week about Bitcoin and the blockchain.
Cool. We got welcome, Cher. You came at the last minute, Cher, but welcome. We're just wrapping it up, and I don't know if Brandon's going to stick around. Maybe he'll stick around. I don't know if I can. Hi. Well, don't go anywhere yet. Maybe he's going to have something to tell you, or convey a message, or answer a question for you. Okay. But I'm gonna bone out
the recording, and then we'll see you guys next week, and I'll just talk to Sherry offline.
There you go. Okay. All right, you guys. Have fun.